Welcome back, everyone, and thank you so much for coming back from your tea break so promptly. My very great pleasure to welcome our final speaker for this morning's session, Emeritus Professor Jane James. Jane was the head of tourism at Flinders University from 1997 to 2012. Her company, Jaytalk Consulting, specialises in site interpretation, helping businesses identify their best stories, then telling them really, really well. Jane's an educator and an interpreter and has an international reputation for research in site interpretation and tourism. Jane's a current member of the Heritage Council, South Australia, and has been an active member of many local government and professional bodies. She's also been the recipient of many honours and awards, and in 2009 was the winner of the South Australian Tourism Award for Outstanding Contribution by an Individual. And in 2011 won the award for Tourism Education and Training for Flinders University. Actually, Jane wasn't too bothered about any of those things in the form that I introduced her, but she did want me to say that basically Jane's a trainer at heart, and she's an ardent believer in the power of interpretation, telling stories and telling them really, really well. So I'm very pleased to be welcoming Jane to the stage.
Right, good morning everybody, and like some people before me, I'd just like to acknowledge that we meet on Kaurna land, and they were the original custodians of heritage in this place. Now, I come to you with this terribly posh title of Emeritus Professor. All right, what that means is that I retired from Flinders University in March this year, and if you retire and you've been there for a long time and you've done sufficient administration, and believe you me, I did, right, then they make you an Emeritus Professor. There's a little bit more to that. It means you keep your email for life, and it means they can ask you to do things like course reviews without paying you. All right, when I retired in March this year, I started consulting. I'd actually done a lot of consulting prior to that. It was called research. And when I got paid for that consulting, the money went to the university and into a fund, a consulting fund called Jane James's Consulting Fund. The university took its cut, a relatively large one, and I could use the rest for professional development. And my professional development was to travel around the world. I was a professor of tourism, so in my job description I have to travel. Travel around the world looking at site interpretation, and it was great fun. And then come about December last year, when my executive dean announced that there was going to be another course review, and I'd done 3 already, I looked at her and thought, I don't think so. I'm out of here. So I left, and I left to do this consulting. So that's what I've been doing vaguely for the last little while, but I was really going to stand up here and start to tell you that my credentials are this. I started off my professional life as a geologist. I have an honours degree and a PhD in geology, and geologists are the rapers and pillagers of the planet. And then I moved into environmental management from geology, from environmental management into ecotourism, and then from ecotourism into international tourism, because that was the whole world and that was a much better option. And whilst geologists are the rapers and pillagers of the planet, tourism sells it to the highest bidder. So my credentials for you this morning are perhaps not good, although I think they're wonderful. What I'm going to talk to you today about is absolutely nothing at all to do with, I'm actually not going to mention historic houses, gardens or collections, because I know relatively little about them. I just said that to Richard at coffee time. He said, yes, you do. And I said, yes, I know a lot about Carrickhill because I do a lot of work there. And I know a fair bit about houses and gardens of East Anglia, having done a tour, which is another story, this last Northern Hemisphere summer. But essentially, I'm a tourism person. And I am a great believer in interpretation, and what I'm going to talk to you today is about tourism, because I've listened to speakers over the last 24 hours, and many of them have said, oh, if only we could get more visitors, oh, if only we could have more money, oh, if only we could. I guess I'm going to end up saying, well, why don't you, because this is the way you do it. So I need to ask just a number of questions, and what these are initially, do you know who your visitors are and do you know what they want? And you might know that, but even if you don't know that, Tourism Australia does. The South Australian Tourism Commission, which is the government organisation in South Australia, also knows who your visitors are and what they want. And every state in Australia has a tourism organisation. And just to prove that the accent that I think I still retain a little, that I also work on the other side of a much bigger pond, that in the UK there's a fantastic amount of research that's been done by Maurice Hargraves McIntyre, and they know who your visitors are as well. So let's start off first of all with Tourism Australia. Tourism Australia talks about visitors as experience seekers, and this is what experience seekers love to do. And remember that the title of my talk is What's Love and Money Got to Do with It? So I'm going to talk about things that people love and things that they'll be willing to spend money on. They love being active, not passive. They want experiences where there's a potential for discovery and surprise. They want to find out new things. And many of them don't even know that there are historic houses in Australia of any sort, so that if you give them something that they can discover and surprise at a historic house, a garden, or with a collection, they'll love it and love you. They want experiences that make their hearts flutter, or make them laugh, or even make them cry. So they're looking for experiences that engage emotions and senses, and they want to be able to connect in an emotional, sometimes even a spiritual way. They also want their knowledge in context, and the previous speaker said very much that they wanted to understand how people lived then relative to how people live now, and that's absolutely spot on. They want to be able to link the past to the present, and very particularly their present, what they are doing now. They want shared experiences with family and friends, and very importantly, they want to make memories. That's what they love. This is what they'll spend money on. They'll spend money on experiences that stimulate the mind, that make them think. And if you take nothing else away from my talk this morning, the thing that you must know, thou shalt know, please, is that if you make people think, making them think is what makes them make memory. If they come to your house or garden or look at your collection and just have a nice time and go away and say, oh, I had a nice time, then that is the kiss of death for your place. All right? Because you can have a nice time anywhere. You actually need to challenge them. You need to make them think. You need to make them think, wow, that's amazing. Oh, God, isn't that awful? Or isn't this fabulous? You need to have some sort of emotional reaction, because as soon as they start to think about it, they're starting to make a memory. It's how your brains work. So you must stimulate the mind. They like privileged access. They want to do things that other people don't do. You know, the I've done something you haven't done factor is very important. So behind the scenes tours, privileged access, those sorts of things they will pay money for. And they love to learn one-on-one personal experiences or very small groups. They want hands-on and interactive activities. They quite like them for nothing, and families particularly like them at low cost. But it's not so much paying the money as it being seen as value for money. So you can charge money for it, provided they think they're getting enough for their dollar. They want authenticity, and let's face it, historic houses, gardens and collections have got authenticity in spades, as the previous speaker acknowledged. They want choice and, as I've said, value for money. They don't want to be, like I am at the moment, rushed. They want unrushed experiences, exclusivity and high quality. That is particularly true of the international visitors. International visitors who come to Australia are what's called sophisticated travellers. That doesn't mean they wear a little black dress, although they probably do. It means that they've already travelled somewhere else. Australia is not their first time destination. If they're in Europe, they've already travelled to at least one other and often 3 other European countries. We're a long-haul destination. Europeans won't come here until they've been to Europe, possibly to America, possibly to Southeast Asia, and then to Australia. We're a long way. The only people for whom we are not a long-haul destination is New Zealand, and they think they're almost Australian anyway, and all the New Zealanders will kill me for that. There's always someone who will react. So sorry about that. But they're short haul. But there aren't enough of them to sustain the tourism industry in Australia, so wonderful though they are, she said, digging herself into an ever deeper hole. I'll stop now. They're not what the Europeans are like. Americans will go to Europe before they come to Australia. So when visitors come to Australia, they have certain expectations of quality, of standards, of the sorts of interpretation they're going to get at different sites. And they want to have experiences that they can't have anywhere else. It's called the brag factor. They talk about it in the tourism industry, giving people the opportunity to say, I've been somewhere or done something or had an experience that you haven't had, right, is very important in tourism. And don't sit there and judge, because you're all like that as well. You love to have done things that other people haven't done. So that's what they'll pay for. The South Australian Tourism Commission has also identified who your visitors are. They also talk about the experience seekers, the same criteria as Tourism Australia. But South Australia also targets these people called MPPs. Has anybody got any idea what an MPP is? I'm one. At least half the people in this room are MPPs. It has something to do with being mature. But the M is not for mature, right? An MPP is a most profitable prospect, all right? And you're not, let's face it, you're probably not a most profitable prospect if you're in your 30s with a young family and paying off the mortgage, right? You haven't got disposable income then. You have when you are older, especially if you've been professional. You're sophisticated, as I say, you've travelled a lot before, come from a wide range of socioeconomic backgrounds, have an average of 4 holidays a year, and more than 70% of them are domestic visitors. That means Australians travelling in Australia. All right? I could ask you to put your hand up if you think you're an MPP, but I won't, because then we'll know if you've paid the mortgage off or not. Okay, and then in tourism there are all these categories. You think these are just names that people talk about at dinner parties, but there are real categories in tourism. There's yuppies. I used to be one of those. Dinks, double income, no kids. I probably was, but it was so long ago I can't remember. VFRs, visiting friends and relatives. We are a migrant population in Australia, so international visitors often come to visit friends and relatives. They used to not be considered important by tourism because they didn't stay in hotels, but they do spend money on other things, especially visits. And if you think about where you went for your last holiday or visit in Australia, the chances are you were a VFR traveller. You went to visit a friend or a relative, or you went to a conference on the excuse of going to see the friend or the relative. All right? And then there's this group, the baby boomers. I'm one of those. An empty nester. I'm one of those, and I've changed the locks. Yes. And I'm a ski. A ski is spending the kids' inheritance, but I'm actually a skin, spending the kids' inheritance now. All right? And then there's whoopies. Whoopies are these baby boomers who are retiring. I'm one of these post-war baby boomers starting to retire, often professional, apparently with lots of disposable income, and we're called the whoopies. We used to be called the grey nomads, but too many of us go to the hairdressers and dye it a different colour, so we're now called whoopies, wealthy, healthy older people. I won't ask you to say if you think you're one of those as well. All right, which of these groups comes to your place? Do you know? All right. Then this is the UK research from Morris, Hargreaves and McIntyre, and they've divided all of visitors, this is in the UK, into these culture segments. It's on their website, it's free, it's the most wonderful document, these fantastic templates, just download it. All right. And they have divided all culture visitors, which includes parks, heritage houses, gardens, collections, into these sectors. Enrichment, mature, traditional, interested in heritage and nostalgia. Entertainment, consumers, popularist, leisure, mainstream. Expression, receptive, confident, community expressive, and perspective, settled, self-sufficient, focused and contented. And there's 3-page summaries on each one of these in the document. You should get them. It's really good reading. Tells you exactly where they go and how much they spend and how often. How could you not access it? This 5th category is people looking for stimulation, who are active, experimental, looking for discovery and interested in things that are contemporary. Affirmation, who are into very family-focused. Self-identity, aspirational, quality time and improvement. release, they're busy, ambitious, prioritising and wistful. It sounds like my youngest daughter, a bit of everything. And essence, discerning, spontaneous, independent and sophisticated. And when you look at these groups, these are the ones who are already interested in historic houses, gardens and collections. The enrichment, the expression, the affirmation and the essence. These ones are not interested in the slightest. They're not interested, they never will be. Give them another 20 years and they'll move into another category. They're the ones you see doing this all the time. Although I was doing that, I must confess, whilst driving and probably having a conversation with someone else. So these are younger people. They're not interested, don't waste your time with them. And these three groups are the ones that have the potential to be interested. The people who are in the perspective group have the greatest potential. The stimulation people are a younger category, younger socio-economic group. They're interested if events are included. So if you've got events at a historic house or garden, then they would be interested. And it's a bit like the previous speaker saying, whose name I've forgotten, which is why I keep saying previous speaker, I'm sorry. Kate, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kate. Kate kept saying that she was unashamedly commercial, and if she could get the Westpac people to dine in the dining room of a historic house, then why wouldn't she? Because then they get exposure to the house. That's what this group is like. If you do a really fantastic event at a historic house or garden, they'll get there and they'll think, well, this is quite interesting. I've never been here before. I must come back when I haven't been to the event. It works. And then the release people are the people with also some potential. Then there are ways that people actually behave on site. This is based on some research by Bitgood looking at visitors in the UK and Europe, and has been followed up with some research in Australia, and all of us fall into one of these four categories: social visitors, learn together families, intellectual visitors, or sensualists. This is what social visitors are like. They go in pairs or groups of friends. It's a social outing. The site's a backdrop for their visit. They're not particularly interested in the subject matter. It's just a nice place to go in the hope that there might be good coffee there. All right? But they want talking points. Right? They're looking for triggers to their conversation and issues that they can discuss. They want novelty and variety, and they see the place as a social space with a close contact with nature, where nature could be everything from native Australian bushland to a manicured rose garden. It's nature in that context, stuff that grows. That's about it. They love the human stories, the gossip, anything that involves scandal or intrigue. Those sorts of stories are absolute gems. They like interesting facts and tidbits of conversation, and they hate tour guides, right? They will talk to the site staff, but not necessarily on a guided walk, because it'll stop them from talking to each other, right? And I love the slide that Kate had about do not talk to the guide until they'd finished. I just loved it. I have to get a copy of that. I could use it everywhere. Oops, sorry. Previous. Right, these are social visitors doing social things at different sites. Top left is the Boulevard of the Stars in Hong Kong. Top right is in the limestone hot springs in Pamukkale in Turkey. Bottom left is in Tasmania. And bottom right, I can't remember. But all these people are at various sites, and they're talking to each other more or less about where they are and what they're seeing. But what is most important to them is the fact that they're doing it with their family and friends. Then there's learn together families. They're looking for quality time and a shared experience where they can learn together. So they need some sort of stimulation and active learning. They've got to be doing things, not the dreaded activity sheet. You know, the thing that you get in museums. It's the thing that puts all 5-year-olds off museums forever. You know, you go on a school excursion, you walk in, they give you an activity sheet, and you're not allowed to leave or eat your lunch in your lunchbox until you've filled it in. And it's the worst thing that ever happens in museums. Believe me, it is. Right? So they like to do things. They like to get involved. So I love those pictures that Kate had of people lying on the bed because it was a reproduction cover on the bed so they could without damaging anything. You could do things. They like things to be energetic and enjoyable with their family because then they'll sleep tonight, right? Especially with small children. and activities that adults and children can do together. And there's a new group, it's quite interesting, of grandparents and children, that there's lots of them doing activities together rather than parents and children. So it needs to be the sorts of experiences where the grandparents can be perhaps not quite so active as the children, because they really need sleep tonight. They want sensory experiences that can be pointed out or incorporated into the activities, so things that you can smell or touch or taste or whatever. They quite like to be in charge themselves, even though they've been told what's available, because, you know, they're grown-ups and they think, oh, I don't need you to show me around or tell me what's here, but make it easy for me to find my way around. They want close encounters with nature or history, and they need things that allow them to talk amongst themselves. So these are some Learn Together families. These photos, the top row and the one bottom left, are all from Kelvin Grove Museum, and having just slammed museums, I have to tell you that Kelvin Grove Museum, I think, is one of the best museums on the planet. It's in Glasgow. If you haven't been, you have to go. It's just fantastic. And these are father and son looking at a wonderful painting on the wall with thought bubbles coming out of the heads of the people sitting at the table. At one end is the old guy, and at the other end of the table is the young wife. And standing next to the old guy who's sitting at the head of the table is the butler. And the thought bubble, there's adult thoughts and children thoughts. I'm not quite sure how you stop the children from pressing the adult thought buttons, but the adult thought from the old guy at the end of the table is, I mustn't drink too much red wine because I have to beget me an heir later tonight. Down the far end of the table is the young wife saying, oh, for goodness sake, give me another glass of wine because I can't bear the thought of his cold hands touching me later. And the butler is thinking, if only he knew I'd already given her a good seeing to. And it makes you look at that painting a totally different way, whereas before you might just have walked past it. It's really engaging stuff. The children top right are recreating one of Monet's paintings by looking at the picture on the wall, which are deliberately hung at children level, and trying to recreate it with polystyrene coloured blocks running backwards and forwards. And the one bottom left is to try and recreate the portrait paintings with spiral blocks, eyes, nose, mouth. I'm sure there's a children's game that does that. Really engaging stuff for Learn Together families. And bottom right is in Winchester Cathedral in England, and it's a children's tour of Winchester Cathedral. And when they tell you to look at the formations on the ceiling, they actually tell you to lie on the altar steps. If you're an old fuddy-duddy or an MPP, there's a mirror top table that you can look in. But trust me, I've seen adults saying, I'll have what they're having, and lying on the altar steps to see the ceiling. Fantastic tourism stuff. Then there's intellectual visitors. I like to think that I fall into this category, ha-ha. I have some interest in heritage sites. I have a wide range of interests, but I'm not particularly knowledgeable about your site, but I'm keen to learn. That's what intellectual visitors are like. They like to find out about the significance of your site, significance in terms of, is it national heritage, state heritage, international heritage, those sorts of things, and significance to the place where it is, the people who live there, and significant in today's world. So they're very interested in significance. They want to be able to link your site to their life experiences and things that they do know about, and how it links to wider trends and issues. They want their curiosity and inquiry stimulated. They love the stories of real lives and hidden stories, and they love things behind the scenes. It's that brag factor thing again. Show me something that other people don't see. These are intellectual visitors. My colleague Susan Cross from a wonderful interpretation company in the UK called Telltale, looking at very seriously at a panel at a medieval village in Germany. I thought she was taking it in greatly. She wasn't. She was checking it for errors because she's a professional interpreter. Another colleague who's looking at some panels very seriously in the Botanic Gardens. And the bottom one's me, sitting on a talking bench at Felbrigg Hall in, help me out, Richard? Norfolk, listening to Stephen Fry talk about how he used to live down the road and cycled to collect chestnuts here so that he could win at Conker so that he could win at conquer competitions, and about how he heard that they were having a sale of the books in the some of the books in the library. So he cycled his 5 miles, bought 6 books, and he still has them as pride of place in his collection. And suddenly Felbrigg Hall meant much more to me, right? But I was trying to be serious about it, but the person who was taking the photograph kept making me laugh, as did Stephen Fry. And I have to tell you, I went there 12 months later after I'd been there in 2011. I went there this year, and it wasn't working, and it hadn't been working for 4 months, and I was so cross, because it's a fantastic interpretive experience. Anyway, this is intellectual, and intellectuals want these people, people who are the experts and know lots of stuff that you don't know, and want to impart that. And I'm afraid my images are not heritage, not cultural heritage anyway. Then there are sensualists. How am I doing for time? Sensualists are people who relate to sites on an intuitive or spiritual level. They like time to relax and reflect and to just be. And there must be lots of people who come to especially gardens or stand in front of particular pieces in your collection and just want to absorb it. I remember going past the Mona Lisa in the Louvre. I think you get 16 seconds and then they move you on. And I went and saw the crown jewels in the Tower of London, and I went round 3 times because you're on a conveyor belt that moves you along, right? And you walk past, you're like this. And the conveyor belt's taking you this way, and you're still trying to see. I went round 3 times, and the 3rd time the security people came and stopped me because they thought I was casing the joint. And I said no, but I hadn't had time to absorb it. So there were times there where I wanted to just be and gaze at wonder at these fabulous jewels, just because. They like spending time, the essentialists like spending time outdoors or in beautiful or inspiring places. It's very important to them. They're often self-sufficient in what they require when they come to your site. So they might just like a map, but they don't need to be handheld. They may not want to take your trail in the order that you've designed it. They may not want to read all of your panels or even any of them. They're fairly self-sufficient, and quite often they come alone. And they're the sensualists. They like quiet areas or quiet times. It's absolutely essential to their enjoyment of the site. They like views, including opportunities to just stand and stare. Sometimes they're called refuge areas, where you can just think, you just get that, oh, it's a good to be alive day. Look at me, aren't I lucky? I wonder what the poor people are doing. That sort of feeling. They like sensory opportunities. They like sites that are well designed aesthetically, and over the last day we've seen fabulous photographs of unbelievably aesthetically well designed houses and gardens. Fabulous things. So they would love your sites. And they like artistic expressions and interpretations. They like to participate. So, if you have an art class on your site, they'd be there even if they couldn't paint, right? They would love those sorts of things. Okay, so here are sensualists just gazing at the view. This is me at Felbrigg Hall, top right. Somebody else sitting on Stephen Fry's bench and not listening to what he was saying because the view was so fabulous. And the other one's just Tuscany. Why not? So, love matters most to social visitors, learn together families and sensualists, and money matters most to intellectual visitors and learn together families in terms of affordability. So do you know what tourism's doing for you? Do you know how tourism's promoting your businesses? Of course you don't. They had 2 campaigns. There's one, they're going to go very fast. There's one called There's Nothing Like Australia, and the other one's called No Leave, No Life. Nothing Like Australia is a global marketing campaign, and they ask visitors to Australia to upload their pictures and their stories of the great experiences they've had that demonstrate why there's nothing like Australia. When I Googled on the There's Nothing Like Australia, Tourism Australia site, historic houses, I came up with Glenelg suburb, Mudgee, and Queensland architectural style. When I Googled houses and gardens, I came up with Cockingham Green Gardens and miniature houses, Floriade in Canberra, and a beach house to rent in Queensland. And when I Googled collections, I came up with the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Festival in Sydney in 2011 and Aboriginal cultural experiences in Melbourne. Nothing, zero about the sorts of properties that you're at. The other campaign is No Leave, No Life, and Australians have 129 million days of untaken leave, and 1 in 4 full-time workers in Australia has more than 25 days of accrued recreation leave. I was one of them until I retired, and then they just gave me the money for it, which was great. But there is this campaign to try and make people take their leave. And gardens, houses and collections should be part of a short break. So what could you do to help take your get rid of that 129 million days of untaken leave? Tourism Australia will give you all of these things in kit form, and they give you this to hang over your computer. There's a whole range. This is the closest one I could get to heritage, because lots of them are covered with reef and rock and kangaroos and things. Okay, South Australia has 2 campaigns. Intrastate is Best Backyard, and Interstate is Let Yourself Go. Intrastate, this one is for the Flinders Ranges, get some perspective. This one is the Interstate, and this is for Kangaroo Island. And these are the images that they're using under History and Heritage on Kangaroo Island to let yourself go. I don't think that the tin shed at the bottom really is a historic house, but it could be. There are 13 strategies in the State Tourism Plan for South Australia, where interpretation is strategy number 10. Being able to tell good interpretation, good stories is absolutely imperative. So never underestimate the power of a good story. Why do stories or interpretation make a difference? They turn your products into an experience. Your houses, gardens and collections are products. And trust me, no visitor cares anything about your product. They only care about the experience that they will have with it. They make boring things interesting, and some of your things are really boring. Even though you love them dearly, you're paid to love them dearly, your brain is tuned to love them dearly, you have to make visitors love them dearly too. You do that through good storytelling, and you have to make people love what you love. Why do stories make a difference? They help make memories. You have to make people think. You make a memory, and if you make a memory, they'll come back, and therefore you make money. So what's love got to do with it? Get an emotional reaction and make them care. What's money got to do with it? Make them think, make them make a memory, and give them something to brag about. Like all visitors, love and money have got a lot to do with it. Thank you.